Hi, welcome to this week's video lecture. So this week of our class looks a little different in that we are not working from our textbook. We are working more from a few different websites, some short videos, and an article. So this week focuses in on hate crimes and implicit bias and the relationship between those two phenomena. Indiana has recently passed a hate crimes legislation which defines a hate crime or a bias crime as an offense in which the person who committed the offense knowingly or intentionally selected the person who was injured, damaged, otherwise affected property because of the color, creed, disability, national origin, race, religion, or sexual orientation of the injured person or owner or occupant of the property. So that's the definition. The FBI defines a hate crime a little differently as a criminal offense committed against a person or property which is motivated in whole or part by the offender's bias against the victim's race, religion, disability, ethnic origin, national origin, or sexual orientation. Even if the offender was mistaken in their perception that the victim was a member of the group, the offense is still considered a hate crime because the offender was motivated by bias against the person or group. So this is the Indiana resources, and you can then click on the resource manual if you find this interesting, which explains the committee as well as documents the crimes, characteristics, targeted groups, ages, hate crimes, and active hate crime groups in extremist groups in Indiana. Another link for this semester or for this week is hate crimes statistics. So you can go to incidences and offenses, and you're going to get an overview about how frequently these have been reported, the total number of single bias instances, multiple bias instances, with over 6,000 offenders. And then you can look through and see that most hate crimes occur against specific races, ethnicities, or ancestries. And the second most common are religious. You can then go and look within each of these. Specifically, so of the category of race, you can see that most are motivated by an anti-Black or anti-African American bias, 20% from anti-white, and it goes down. The same thing is displayed for religion, where we can see by far most hate crimes for religion are based on an anti-Jewish ideology. And we can see most hate crimes for sexual orientation are based on an anti-gay male bias. So we see this for all the types of offenses. It also talks to us about assaults, intimidations, aggravated assaults. So this provides us with a lot of information about who is experiencing victimization based on these protected categories. We're going to jump back over to the article, which is the first thing. In this article, or maybe it's a book chapter, deals with implicit bias and hate crimes and provides a psychological framework to analyze hate crimes. The author talks about some psychological contributors, about low status groups, prejudice and stereotypes, but she also specifically addresses the role of implicit bias, which in connection with other factors may lead to an incidence of hate crime. And so this is just kind of a nice breakthrough of a review of bias and stereotypes and how these impact hate crimes, because remember, a hate crime is motivated by a specific bias against a specific group. There's some statistical things here. That's not what I really hope you take away from this article, though. I really hope that you focus more on what is a hate crime and how does bias influence specific behavior. Another link here is the implicit bias review from Ohio State University. It also talks about defining implicit bias as an attitude or stereotype that impacts our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. So it notes that some key characteristics of these are pervasive. We all have them. How that explicit and implicit biases can reinforce each other. We often hold biases against those who do not align with our own beliefs, which kind of clues us into maybe how to evaluate these. We generally favor our own in-group, but the really important thing is that implicit biases are malleable. They can change. We can reassociate our brain in these groups. So This part is interesting because we see some research documenting the impact of racial biases in classrooms and courtrooms and hospitals. So again, this is just something to think about as we think about going out into our field one day, becoming correctional officers or police officers, victim advocates, to just be aware that hate crimes exist, that we do all possess kind of implicit bias, and just how these frameworks work together. So the other thing here is a short TED Talk on implicit bias, and there's also an implicit bias quiz which you can take to differentiate some of your own biases if you've never thought about it. So it's just a tool that you can choose to use. It is not required. The discussion for this week also looks a little differently. I'm going to ask you to explain implicit bias in your own words, discuss how they can be related, which this article would be really helpful, as well as the Ohio State page. And then the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is look at the hate crimes data from the FBI and just discuss a little something that you find interesting. For instance, the fact that there are so many assaults might be something that you find interesting, as well as maybe that most anti-religious hate crimes are not focused against an anti-Muslim group, but more focused on an anti-Jewish ideology. So those are the types of things that I would like to see you express and work through this week. If you have any questions about these concepts, please feel free to reach out, and I look forward to seeing you next week.